The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. You led a sorry life, Mom. You never aimed high. No ambition. Maurice's voice echoed across the restaurant, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I stared at my untouched plate, the pasta growing cold as his criticism washed over me. My 28-year-old son sat across from me, his designer shirt perfectly pressed, his confidence radiating like heat. He'd called this dinner to talk about my future, but it felt more like a lecture about my failures. Look at successful people like Amari Crawford, he continued, cutting his steak with sharp precision. She built Brightforge Technologies from nothing. That's real ambition. That's what success looks like. I nodded quietly, not trusting my voice. If only he knew that I was the one who'd built that company alongside Amari. If only he realized he worked for me every single day, in the gleaming offices I'd helped design, using systems I'd coded late into countless nights. But Maurice didn't know. Nobody did. That was exactly how I wanted it. I excused myself early, claiming a headache. As I walked to my car, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was time for my son to learn who his mother really was. Back in my home office, I opened my laptop and logged into Brightforge's financial system. The screen displayed numbers that would make most people dizzy. Revenue streams, investment portfolios, quarterly projections. To me, they were as familiar as my own heartbeat. I scrolled through the employee roster until I found his name, Maurice Campbell, Senior Finance Lead. His salary made me smile. He was doing well, though he had no idea who'd approved his recent raise. The company letterhead bore only one visible founder, Amari Crawford, CEO and public face of Brightforge. But hidden in the legal documents, buried in incorporation papers and board meeting minutes, was another name, SC. That was me, Sloan Campbell, the invisible co-founder. I designed our groundbreaking artificial intelligence platform while Amari handled investors and media interviews. She was brilliant at commanding rooms full of suits and ties. I preferred the quiet satisfaction of building something that actually worked. My phone buzzed with a message from Amari. Board meeting tomorrow at 10. The Ghana project needs final approval. I smiled, knowing the Girls in Tech initiative would change hundreds of lives. Maurice would never connect that humanitarian work to his supposedly unambitious mother. The next morning, I watched from my kitchen window as Maurice left for work in his shiny BMW. He lived in the apartment complex across the street, close enough that I could see his lights at night, close enough to worry when he worked too late. At Brightforge's downtown headquarters, I knew he was already settling into his corner office, reviewing spreadsheets and preparing for meetings. His colleagues respected him. His reports were always thorough and insightful. What they discussed during lunch breaks often made its way back to me through company chatter. Maurice loved talking about Amari, praising her leadership and vision. Yesterday, someone had mentioned the mysterious second founder, and Maurice had laughed it off. Probably just some silent investor, he'd said according to my sources. Someone who wrote a check and faded into the background. If only he knew that silent investor had spent 3 years sleeping 4 hours a night, coding the algorithms that made their AI platform possible. That she'd mortgaged her house twice to keep the company afloat during the early days. That every major decision still crossed her desk for approval. But anonymity had its advantages. I could move through the company's world without anyone expecting small talk or recognition. I was free to focus on the work itself. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sloan, we need you here, Amari said, her voice tight with stress. The Peterson account is threatening to walk, and they're demanding to meet with both founders. I sighed, knowing this day would eventually come. Give me 20 minutes. Brightforge's headquarters rose 43 stories into the sky, all glass and steel gleaming in the afternoon sun. I used my private entrance, avoiding the main lobby where Maurice might spot me. The executive elevator carried me directly to the penthouse level. As I stepped out, I nearly collided with my son. He was carrying a stack of files, probably headed to Amari's office for their weekly financial review. His eyes widened when he saw me. Mom, what are you doing here? My heart hammered against my ribs. Oh, I'm just meeting with someone about a charity project. The lie came easily, practiced from years of deflecting questions about my work. Maurice frowned, glancing around the executive floor with its expensive artwork and panoramic city views. This doesn't seem like the place for charity meetings. Different people, different approaches, I said lightly, already moving past him. See you later, honey. I could feel his confused stare following me down the hallway. The next morning, my phone lit up with notifications from Brightforge's anonymous company chat. Someone had started a thread about seeing me on the executive floor. That older woman who was up there yesterday? Does anyone know who she is? Sloan something. I've seen her in meetings with Amari before. Maybe they're related? She looked kind of familiar. I scrolled through the messages, watching my employees speculate about my identity. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were discussing their own co-founder, like I was some random visitor. One comment made me pause. Maurice Campbell was asking about her too. Seemed really confused. My son was starting to ask questions that could complicate things, especially with the quarterly board meeting approaching. Investors would expect both founders present for major announcements. I closed the app and focused on more pressing matters. The Ghana project needed final budget approval, and 3 new client contracts required my signature. Being invisible meant twice the work. I had to stay informed about everything while pretending to know nothing. But as I reviewed Maurice's latest financial analysis, I felt a surge of pride. His insights were sharp, his recommendations sound. He'd inherited my analytical mind, even if he didn't realize it. Perhaps it was time to start preparing him for the truth. That evening, I sat alone at Miguel's cafe, my usual spot when I needed to think. The small restaurant served excellent soup and minded its own business, perfect for a woman who preferred anonymity. My laptop chimed with an email marked, "Urgent, board decision required." The Ghana Girls in Tech program was ready for launch, but they needed confirmation of funding. The project would cost $3 million. Most of it coming from my personal foundation. I typed back a simple approved and watched as the board members celebrated in their reply thread. They praised the mysterious SC for her continued generosity and unwavering commitment to education. Tomorrow, they'd announce the program publicly. Amari would take the stage, describing our company's humanitarian values while I watched from the back row of some live stream. Another victory credited to someone else. But seeing young girls receive their first computers, watching them discover coding and engineering, that made every sleepless night worthwhile. My phone buzzed with a text from Maurice. Saw the news about Brightforge's charity work. Pretty impressive. Makes me think about doing more meaningful things with my life. I smiled, typing back, "Following your heart is never wrong, honey." If only he knew his heart was already leading him in the right direction. The performance review landed on my desk with glowing remarks. Maurice's supervisor had written 3 pages praising his financial acumen, his leadership potential, and his dedication to the company's mission. Recommending immediate promotion to senior finance lead with corresponding salary adjustment, the final paragraph read. I opened my secure messaging app and sent Amari a quick note. "He deserves it." Her response came back instantly. "Already in motion. Kid's brilliant." 2 days later, Maurice called me, practically shouting with excitement. "Mom, you won't believe this. I got promoted. Senior finance lead, 20% raise, corner office." "That's wonderful, honey," I said, meaning every word. "You've worked so hard for this." Amari called me into her office personally to deliver the news, he continued. She said my financial models were some of the best she'd ever seen. Can you believe that? Amari Crawford thinks I'm talented. I could hear the joy in his voice, the validation he'd been seeking his entire career. Part of me wanted to tell him the truth, that his promotion had crossed my desk first, that I'd been watching his progress for months, but another part enjoyed his pure happiness. "I'm proud of you," I said simply. "Thanks, Mom. Maybe now you can see why ambition matters." The comment stung, but I let it pass. Maurice's social media post appeared on my feed that evening. "Hard work pays off. Not everyone gets handouts or luck. You have to earn it. Grind never stops. Half self-made." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of pride and frustration. He was right about hard work. He'd earned his promotion through dedication and skill. But his dismissal of handouts revealed how little he understood about privilege and opportunity. The comments section filled with congratulations from college friends and coworkers. Several people from Brightforge liked the post, including Amari. My son was building a reputation as someone who'd climbed the ladder through pure merit. If only he knew that ladder had been built by his supposedly unambitious mother. I closed the app and returned to my work. 3 new patent applications needed review, and the AI platform required updates for compliance with international regulations. The irony of being called unambitious while working 16-hour days wasn't lost on me. But ambition, I'd learned, came in different forms. Maurice craved recognition and public success. I found satisfaction in solving problems and creating opportunities for others. Neither approach was wrong, but his inability to see value in quiet achievement worried me. Success wasn't always about being the loudest voice in the room. The media requests started pouring in after Brightforge's latest AI breakthrough made headlines. Tech journalists wanted interviews with both founders, venture capital podcasts requested appearances, and industry conferences extended speaking invitations. Amari forwarded them all to me with a simple message: "Your call, but they're getting persistent." I declined everything, as usual. The spotlight had never appealed to me, even back in college when professors encouraged me to present my research at conferences. I preferred building things to talking about building things. My phone rang, Amari calling from her office. "Sloan, we can't stay invisible forever," she said without preamble. "The board is asking questions. Investors want to meet both founders before the next funding round." "Not yet," I replied, watching Maurice's building through my window. His apartment lights were on, probably reviewing tomorrow's presentations. "I need more time." "Time for what?" I couldn't explain that my son still thought I was a failure, that revealing my identity might shatter our already fragile relationship. Instead, I said, "The company's doing fine without my face on magazine covers." Amari sighed. "Fine, but after the quarterly meeting, we're having this conversation again." I agreed, knowing she was right. The truth would come out eventually. The question was whether I'd control that revelation or let circumstances force my hand. The conversation I'd been dreading finally happened on a quiet Thursday evening. I was leaving Amari's office after a strategy session when I heard familiar voices in the break room. "I really admire what you've built here," Maurice was saying. "I want to create something like this someday. Leave a real mark." Amari's response was warm but careful. "You're already making an impact, Maurice. Your financial insights have shaped some of our biggest decisions." "But I want more," he pressed. "I want to be a founder, not just an employee. Would you consider mentoring me? Maybe I could shadow you, learn how you think?" The silence stretched long enough that I could picture Amari choosing her words carefully. "I appreciate your ambition," she finally said, "but I think you need to focus on mastering your current role first. Leadership comes from understanding every level of an organization." "That sounds like a polite no," Maurice said, his voice tight with disappointment. "It's professional advice from someone who's been where you are." I slipped away before he could respond, but his frustrated tone stayed with me. My son was hungry for advancement, for recognition, for the kind of success he thought I'd never achieved. The irony cut deep. Maurice didn't come to work the next day. His assistant called in sick for him. But I knew better. Rejection always hit him hard, especially from people he admired. I found myself checking his apartment building more frequently, looking for signs of movement behind his windows. The lights stayed on late into the night, but his car never moved from its parking spot. Saturday morning, I knocked on his door with a container of homemade soup. He answered in wrinkled clothes, his hair disheveled. "You look terrible," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. "Thanks for the pep talk, Mom." I set the soup on his kitchen counter and turned to face him. "Rough week at work?" He slumped onto his couch, avoiding my eyes. "I thought I was ready for the next level. Turns out I was wrong. Maybe you're exactly where you need to be." "Easy for you to say," he snapped. "You never had to worry about career advancement or building something meaningful. Some of us actually have ambitions." The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. "Meaningful work comes in many forms, honey. Right? I'll just comfort myself with that while watching other people achieve greatness." I wanted to shake him, to show him the patents and board documents and financial records that proved his mother had achieved plenty. Instead, I squeezed his shoulder and left him to sulk. The memos started appearing more frequently. Budget approvals, strategic decisions, personnel changes, all bearing the signature SC. Employees began noticing the mysterious initials on everything from expense reports to major announcements. Maurice's assistant mentioned it during their morning briefing. Who is this SC person? Their signature is on half the documents that cross your desk. Probably just legal formality, Maurice replied, but I could hear the curiosity in his voice through the office walls. Some silent partner or board member. But when his bonus approval came through with those same initials, he stared at the paper longer than usual. 3 months' salary as a performance reward, signed by someone he'd never met. Must be nice to have that kind of authority, he told his colleague at lunch. Writing checks that big without even showing your face. The irony was becoming almost painful. My son was fascinated by the mysterious SC, praising her business acumen and decision-making skills. He had no idea he was describing his own mother. That evening I watched him through my window as he paced his apartment, talking animatedly on the phone. Probably telling friends about his mysterious benefactor, the invisible executive who'd recognized his worth. If only he could extend that same recognition to the woman who'd raised him. Maurice started lingering near the executive wing during his lunch breaks. I spotted him from the security cameras, pretending to check his phone while actually watching who entered and exited the restricted floors. Looking for someone? Amari asked him one afternoon, her tone amused. Just curious about the building layout, he said quickly. Amazing architecture up here. Most of our strategic meetings happen on this floor, she explained. Lots of decision makers you've never seen. Like the famous SC? Amari's smile faltered slightly. Among others. I watched this exchange from my office monitor, my heart racing. Maurice was getting closer to the truth, driven by curiosity and professional ambition. The mysterious co-founder who'd been approving his raises and signing his bonuses was becoming an obsession. That weekend, he asked me about my week over dinner. Same as always, I said, quiet and unremarkable. Don't you ever want more, Mom? Don't you wonder what it would be like to have real influence? I almost laughed. If he only knew that his unremarkable mother had influenced every major decision at Brightforge for the past 5 years. Influence comes in many forms, I said carefully. Right, the invisible kind that nobody notices. His dismissal stung more than usual. Late Thursday night, Maurice used his elevated finance access to dig deeper into company records. The timestamp on the system logs showed 11:47 p.m., well past normal business hours. I watched from my home office as he navigated through restricted files, his senior-level clearance granting access to documents most employees never saw. Incorporation papers, founding member agreements, initial investment records. Then he found it, the co-founder documentation listing Sloan Campbell as equal partner and primary technology developer. The system logged his activity for exactly 43 minutes. 43 minutes of staring at proof that his supposedly unsuccessful mother was actually his boss's business partner. I could picture his face through the security footage, the confusion, the disbelief, the slow dawning of impossible reality. He'd probably checked and rechecked the documents, searching for some logical explanation. The next morning he called in sick again. I knew he wasn't really ill. He was processing the fact that everything he'd believed about his mother's life was wrong. That the woman he'd criticized for lacking ambition had co-founded the company where he worked. My phone buzzed with a text from Amari. Maurice seems off lately. Everything okay with him? I typed back, he's fine. Just working through some personal revelations. Maurice spent the weekend diving deeper into company archives. Every patent filing, every major contract, every strategic decision from the past 5 years, all bearing my signature alongside Amari's. The evidence was overwhelming. His mother wasn't just a silent partner or mysterious investor. She was the technical architect behind Brightforge's groundbreaking AI platform, the strategist who'd guided their expansion into international markets, the humanitarian who'd funded their charitable initiatives. I found myself checking my phone obsessively, waiting for an angry call or confused text. But Maurice remained silent, probably struggling to reconcile his image of me with the corporate powerhouse revealed in those documents. Monday morning brought a surprise. He showed up to work as usual, but his behavior was completely different. Quieter, more thoughtful, less prone to the casual arrogance that had defined his professional persona. "You seem distracted," his assistant observed during their daily briefing. "Just processing some new information," he replied. That afternoon, he requested a meeting with Amari, not for career advice or mentorship opportunities, but to ask direct questions about company history. "Tell me about the early days," he said. "How did you and your co-founder meet?" Amari's carefully crafted response revealed nothing about my identity, but confirmed the SC was indeed instrumental in building everything Maurice admired about Brightforge. The revelation hit Maurice like a tidal wave. Every criticism he'd ever made about my life, every joke about my lack of ambition, every condescending comment about my simple existence, all of it came rushing back as he stared at the irrefutable proof of my success. I watched him through the office cameras as he sat alone in his cubicle, head in his hands. The man who'd built his identity around merit and hard work was discovering that his biggest role model was the mother he'd dismissed as a failure. The patents told the story of sleepless nights spent coding revolutionary algorithms. The financial records revealed strategic investments that had multiplied Brightforge's value tenfold. The board meeting minutes showed a pattern of humanitarian decisions that had improved thousands of lives. His phone buzzed with a notification, another company memo signed SC, another reminder that the mysterious executive he'd been praising was actually Sloane Campbell, his mother, the woman whose sorry life he'd criticized over dinner just weeks ago. I imagined the shame washing over him, the crushing weight of realizing how wrong he'd been, how his need for recognition had blinded him to the quiet strength that had surrounded him his entire life. That evening, he didn't call or text. He simply sat in his apartment, probably replaying every conversation we'd ever had about success and ambition. Maurice didn't come to work for 3 days. His assistant fielded calls and rescheduled meetings while rumors circulated about his sudden absence. Stress, some people whispered. Burnout, others suggested. But I knew the truth. My son was confronting the uncomfortable reality that his judgmental attitude toward my life had been completely misguided. The mother he'd seen as unambitious had actually achieved more than he'd ever dreamed possible. I found myself driving past his apartment building, checking for signs of movement. His car remained in the same parking spot, and the lights in his windows suggested he was home, but not engaging with the outside world. Part of me wanted to knock on his door, to offer comfort or explanation, but another part recognized that this was something he needed to process alone. The foundation of his worldview had cracked, and rebuilding would take time. Amari called Tuesday morning. "Is Maurice okay? People are starting to ask questions." "He's fine," I assured her, "just dealing with some family stuff." "Should I be worried about him professionally?" I considered the question carefully. No, if anything, this might make him a better employee. The Founders Gala announcement changed everything. Brightforge's board had decided to celebrate our international expansion with a black tie event, complete with media coverage and investor presentations. "Both founders will be present," the invitation read. "Join us in honoring the visionaries behind Brightforge's revolutionary technology." Amari cornered me in my office the moment the invitations went out. "No more hiding, Sloane. This is happening whether you like it or not." I stared out the window at the city skyline, knowing she was right. 5 years of anonymity were about to end in one evening of spotlights and speeches. "The board insists," she continued. "Investors want to meet both founders before the next funding round. We can't keep treating you like a state secret." "I know," I said quietly. "It's just complicated." "Because of Maurice?" I nodded. "He's going to be there. Finance team is handling event logistics. Maybe it's time he learned the truth anyway." "Maybe," I agreed, though my stomach churned at the thought. That evening, I called Maurice for the first time since his discovery. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice flat and distant. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling?" A long pause. Confused. "Want to talk about it?" "Not yet." I respected his need for space, but the gala was only 2 weeks away. The tension at Brightforge was palpable. Maurice had returned to work but remained unusually quiet, completing his tasks with mechanical precision, while avoiding eye contact with colleagues. He'd volunteered to help coordinate the gala's financial logistics, expense tracking, vendor payments, budget oversight. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son would be managing the event where his mother's identity would finally be revealed. I watched him through the security cameras as he worked late into the evenings, surrounded by spreadsheets and vendor contracts. His movements were careful, deliberate, as if focusing on numbers could distract him from the emotional turmoil he was experiencing. "He seems different," his assistant confided to a colleague during lunch. "More serious? Less arrogant, I guess?" The observation was accurate. Maurice's casual cockiness had been replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. The revelation about my identity had shaken his confidence in ways I hadn't anticipated. Part of me worried about the psychological impact. Had learning the truth about my success somehow diminished his own sense of achievement? Or was he simply processing the uncomfortable reality of how wrong he'd been about me? Either way, the gala would force a confrontation neither of us was ready for. Late Friday night, Maurice used his administrative access to unlock a restricted file I'd forgotten existed. Founder Identity, SC, confidential access only. The document contained my complete professional biography from my early days as a coding prodigy through the founding of Brightforge. Every patent, every strategic decision, every humanitarian initiative, all laid out in excruciating detail. He read about my graduate work in artificial intelligence, my breakthrough algorithms that had revolutionized data processing, my decision to remain anonymous despite industry recognition. The file even included photos from technical conferences where I'd presented research under academic credentials. But the most damaging section detailed my personal philosophy. SC believes that meaningful work should speak for itself, regardless of public recognition. Her commitment to anonymity stems from a desire to focus on results rather than reputation. I imagined Maurice reading those words, understanding for the first time that my lack of ambition had actually been a conscious choice to prioritize substance over status. The timestamp showed he'd spent over 2 hours reading and rereading the document, 2 hours of confronting the uncomfortable truth about his mother's extraordinary career while remembering his own harsh criticisms of her sorry life. The weight of that irony must have been crushing. The night of the Founders Gala arrived with all the glamour and pressure I'd been dreading. The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements, while photographers captured arriving guests in their designer evening wear. I stood in the wings, adjusting my sleek black dress for the 10th time. My hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness about the crowd, but from knowing Maurice was somewhere in that ballroom, probably still processing the revelation about my identity. Amari appeared beside me, radiant in emerald green silk. "Ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "Remember, most of these people already know your reputation. They're just excited to finally put a face to the name." Through the curtain, I could see Maurice near the registration table, clipboard in hand, directing the volunteer staff with quiet efficiency. He looked handsome in his black tuxedo, professional and composed despite everything he'd learned. The announcer's voice boomed across the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the co-founders of Brightforge Technologies." Amari squeezed my hand and stepped onto the stage. The crowd erupted in applause as she took the microphone. "5 years ago, my brilliant partner and I started this company with a simple vision," she began. "Tonight, I'm thrilled to introduce the woman who made that vision reality, Sloan Campbell." The spotlight hit me as I walked onto the stage, and the applause seemed to thunder from every corner of the ballroom. Investors, employees, industry leaders, all on their feet, celebrating the mysterious co-founder who'd finally emerged from the shadows. I found Maurice in the crowd immediately. He stood frozen near the back, his clipboard forgotten, staring at me with an expression of pure disbelief. Even though he'd known this moment was coming, seeing his mother on that stage, his boss, his role model, the woman whose signature appeared on his paychecks, was clearly overwhelming. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I know many of you have wondered about the anonymous half of our partnership. I've always believed that meaningful work should speak for itself, regardless of who gets the credit. The crowd murmured appreciatively, but I kept my eyes on Maurice. His face cycled through emotions: shock, shame, something that might have been pride. Tonight marks not just Brightforge's expansion, but also my own step into the light, I continued. Sometimes hiding becomes a habit, but growth requires courage to be seen. As I left the stage, dozens of people surrounded me. Congratulations, business cards, interview requests. But all I could think about was my son, standing motionless while his entire understanding of me reshuffled itself. He'd finally seen me. The question was, what would he do with that revelation? Maurice disappeared before I could reach him. By the time I'd finished with the inevitable swarm of investors and journalists, he was gone, his volunteer duties abandoned, his tuxedo jacket left on a chair. I drove home with my heart heavy, the triumph of finally revealing my identity overshadowed by my son's obvious distress. The gala had been a professional success, but a personal disaster. The next morning, a package appeared outside Maurice's apartment door. I'd spent hours writing and rewriting the note, trying to find words that might bridge the gap between us. Inside the package, a clean leather notebook and a handwritten letter. Maurice, you're brilliant, dedicated, and kind. Everything you've achieved at Brightforge came from your own talent and hard work. I never wanted my secret to diminish your accomplishments or make you question your worth. I'm proud to work beside you, and prouder still to be your mother. The signature on your paychecks never mattered as much as the person who earned them. Lam. I left the package without knocking, respecting his need for space while hoping the gesture might open a door between us. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text. Thank you for the notebook. Can we talk soon? I typed back immediately. Whenever you're ready. Maurice returned to work the following Monday, but something fundamental had shifted. The cocky confidence that had defined his professional persona was gone, replaced by something quieter and more thoughtful. During meetings, he listened more and spoke less. When colleagues bragged about their achievements, he remained silent instead of trying to one-up them. His suggestions focused on team success rather than personal recognition. He's different, his assistant confided to a friend. More mature, I guess. Less concerned with getting credit for everything. The change was most noticeable in his approach to company initiatives. Maurice began proposing technology education programs for underserved communities, exactly the kind of humanitarian work that had always driven my decisions at Brightforge. What sparked your interest in charitable work? Amari asked during their weekly meeting. I've been thinking about legacy, he replied, about what really matters in the long run. I watched these conversations through security footage, seeing my son evolve in real time. The revelation about my identity had shaken his worldview, but it was rebuilding into something healthier. His new humility made him a better colleague, a more effective leader, and I hoped, a wiser person. Sometimes the most valuable lessons came wrapped in uncomfortable truths. The angry, judgmental young man who'd criticized my sorry life was becoming someone I was genuinely proud to know. 3 weeks later, our extended family gathered for Sunday brunch at my sister's house. The conversation flowed around current events and weekend plans until my brother-in-law asked about retirement. Sloane's been working so hard lately, he observed. When are you planning to slow down? Before I could answer, Maurice set down his coffee cup and looked directly at me. My mom built a company that's changing the world, he said quietly but firmly. She's funded education programs in 12 countries, revolutionized artificial intelligence, and created hundreds of jobs. I wouldn't be where I am without her example. The table fell silent, everyone processing this unexpected declaration from the son who'd spent years dismissing my achievements. She taught me that real success isn't about recognition or status, he continued. It's about the impact you make when nobody's watching. I'm still learning that lesson, but I'm proud to be her son. Our eyes met across the table, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine respect, mixed with love, and maybe a little awe. No revenge was needed. No dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. Just truth, finally acknowledged by the person whose opinion mattered most. Maurice had discovered that his supposedly unsuccessful mother was actually the architect of everything he admired in his professional life. And instead of diminishing him, that knowledge had made him better. We shared a quiet smile as the conversation resumed around us. After 30 years, my son finally understood who I really was.